Hi everyone, welcome back to the Music Chat. We're here today on the first Sunday of Advent for 2020 and leaving Thanksgiving season behind and moving quickly through the many things that kind of happened to us during this year leading up to Christmas. So our church service this morning was certainly themed around the famous hymn that we think of when we think of Advent, O Come, Emmanuel. Mm-hmm. So we thought that would be a fitting way to start the first season of Advent with our chassis to talk mm-hmm. about a little bit of the history of that. And this is sort of up Barbara's alley as a vocalist and singing in choirs and many opportunities that you had over the years to sing pieces from these time periods where mm-hmm. we're dealing with very ancient texts and melodies. And so I'm going to let Barbara tell you a little bit about the history that we found out about O Come.
Well, O Come is a very old melody, a very old text, probably even before the 8th and 9th centuries, but that's as far as anybody can really pinpoint at this point. And even that is a little iffy.
Yeah.
But it is in an antiphon form, and that, if you think of the word antiphonal, then you know what an antiphon is. It is a soloist, and then there's a refrain that everyone sings. And we do that when we do our hymns at church. And it actually comes from the synagogue, which is, I think, another cool thing, because they were in the synagogue during Old Testament times. They would use it to sing the hymns, the psalms, excuse me. So they were always words of the psalms, which is what we do now as well. So it was an antiphon that was used probably before the 8th and 9th century, but we're going to kind of start there because it's really old and it's been through a lot of stuff. And at that time, we are beginning to see the formation of Gregorian chant. And so we're going to put ourselves in a monastery, and we're going to think about evensong, which is the evening prayers. And this was an antiphon that was sung by the monks a week before Christmas. It was the last week of Advent. And so they're often called the O antiphons because each of the days starts with the word O. And they would start on the 17th, and then they would sing them for a week. And each one, it's a prayer. They are mm-hmm. prayers, and the yearning for the coming of Christ to save our world and
right.
what we do in Advent.
They're all verses that help us to prepare for the coming of Christ. Mm-hmm. They're all based on a lot of the Old Testament. A lot of them are based on Isaiah,
yes.
the words of Isaiah.
Yes. Which is also,
right.
I think of Messiah every time I do that.
Yes.
But yeah, that same text.
Yeah, and they're all sort of the names of Jesus, mm-hmm. As depicted in the Old Testament.
That's exactly
and
right.
I wanted Barbara to take a shot at she's pretty decent at her Latin.
Yeah, I'm a little rusty.
So
but I'll
there
do the best
were
I
7 verses in the O antiphons. And so we know them in English, like O Come, Emmanuel was one of them. And so tell us about all of the ones that were there.
And forgive me, because it's been a little while.
So she'll give you the Latin and then English, sort of the rough English translation.
And I would say the first one is O Scientia. Scientia is O wisdom. O Adonai is the Hebrew for God. Second one. O Radix Jesse, the stem of Jesse. O Clavis David, which is the key of David. O Oriens, the light of the east. I love that one. O Rex Gentium, the king of the Gentiles. And O Emmanuel. So the first letters of each name spell Sarkore. And backwards, now this is getting real, like, somebody really did a lot of research on this. Backwards, it's arrow cross.
That's 2 words.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I come, or also tomorrow I shall be. So there are scholars who feel like these are sung in a certain order to declare that message. Some people don't think that's true at all, because sometimes they're sung in a different order, but a lot of people do feel like it is.
Right, and the case for it, for that being legitimate is that apparently poets in this time period, writers in this time period, like to put riddles inside the words, and acrostics, those kinds of things, and so it was a common practice to do that. And if it's a true thing, it's it's interesting, isn't it? It's a kind of a great way to think about it. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the monks in the monasteries singing these antiphons for evensong the week before Christmas, the end of Advent.
But again, we don't know what tune they're singing.
No, we don't.
They're singing some kind of plain chant.
That's right.
That we've lost,
most
likely. Yes.
So now we're going to move to England, which we have done so often, in the 1800s, the early 1800s, and we find the Oxford movement again. We've talked about this many times. The Oxford movement among the Anglican Church in England was a movement that was started with the scholars at Oxford. And they were kind of thinking that the Anglican Church needed to be classed up a little bit. They wanted to go back to some of the liturgy from the Catholic Church. Now remember, when the Anglican Church split from the Catholic Church, they didn't want anything to do with the Catholic traditions. But now these scholars in the 1800s from Oxford were kind of pushing that we go back to some of the traditional liturgy.
Yeah, and of course this kind of thing, plain song and chant and liturgy all give a sort of a structure.
Sure.
And so I think that these scholars felt that had value.
Yes.
That not everything in the Catholic service should be tossed out the door.
They went back to
value.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And so there was a gentleman, Thomas, no, I'm so sorry, it's Neil. What was his first name?
Thomas.
Was it
that,
Thomas?
No, I'm sorry. John Mason Neal.
John Mason Neal is the writer guy. So he is he's an Anglican ordained minister, but unlike some of the other ones we've talked about, he was not one that sought the limelight, and nor did he go up in the ranks of the church. He was a rather humble scholar, and he was a bit sickly, but his great contribution is that because he was a scholar and because he was a little sickly, so he probably had to stay in a lot, he translated many Latin and Greek texts. And so he was able to translate this Latin, O come Emmanuel text, the one that held the Latin verses that we just read. And at that same time, there was another gentleman who was also from this Oxford thing in England, and he's the Thomas one, Thomas Hillmore.
Exactly.
And he was the musical person who, again, they were trying to find these ancient texts to bring back some tradition. So
they were both not only interested in ancient texts, but ancient music as well. So,
right.
Yeah.
So Hillmore took this text and put it with a melody and published it, and I think he saved it for us, actually.
Yes.
It probably never would have become in our common worship services.
But it was with Neil's translation.
Right, he took Neil's translation and he put it to this melody. And at the time they wondered if maybe Hillmore actually wrote the melody, but we later find out that he didn't, but at that time it was very I don't know where this melody came from. But he did publish it, and that is why, and it's the melody that we know, and so that is why it has survived. And this was in 1851. So, from there it traveled the world. But then we have, in 1966, I think this is very interesting, Mary Berry, who also has a very cool name.
Yes.
I believe that she was a cantoress in the church.
Mm-hmm.
She was a choir director. She has a holy name, like
right.
So
Yeah.
I believe
Remember
she
that.
was probably
She's Catholic, right.
probably a sister in the convent, whatever. And I think she might have been just doing research for a paper or for her study, like I did, you know, when I was studying choral music. And she came across, and she was studying the origin of this melody and this O Come, Emmanuel. And she found in the archives of France, in the French library, this copy of the melody in chant, a copy of it from the 15th century that is what we now use. And so it was like, oh my gosh, this is actually where this melody came from. Because we knew kind of sort of it wasn't Helmore.
Yeah, so
you know?
so we think probably he
probably
found this
it
before she found it,
Uh-huh.
of course, but this is probably, I have it, there's a copy, you know, you can Google it on
Mhm.
the internet, and so I printed it out, what Mary found, and probably he did too,
Uh-huh.
way back, it was newer when he found it.
Right, a little bit newer.
But still old. But it was from a French missal.
Mhm.
It now resides, the little book is in the National Library in Lisbon, and it was printed. It's number 65. It's number 65 in this book of hymns, or hymns and psalms probably. And it has the Latin Veni Veni Emmanuel, you know, Veni meaning come, O come. And so it's a great little you know,
It's written
sample.
in chant form.
It's chant.
Mhm.
And we were looking at it before we started the chat, and to try to, you know, kind of put the mysteries of the ancient manuscript sort of in order. And what we find is we've talked about this before with some of the older hymns, how music notation was developing through the centuries into what it is today. And so this is a 4-line music staff rather than 5. And it's still done with tablature, you know, like their square notes that sit on the staff and the lines and spaces. And they do have, like, and hopefully Pastor Jeff has this up so you can follow along with what I'm saying, but you'll see little slur marks, like if you go to the word Emmanuel in the first line of the hymn, you see the slur mark just showing for the singer to interpret that as there's 3 notes in Emmanuel, so there's 3 notes in the man syllable. So the singer knows what to do with that little slur mark there.
And remember, with chant, it's not especially meant to be metrical. It isn't at all.
Yeah, and chant is a very smooth legato.
It goes with the text. So even in conducting chant, you move
it's
the
not a meter,
phrase forward.
Yeah.
So that would be Emmanuel. And so the accent of the word is what you go to.
The word accents are
that's what they do.
Yeah, exactly. And so there are little marks that are sort of reminiscent of today's bar lines. And they're sort of like incomplete bar lines is what they are. And they just basically are showing you where you're taking a breath, where the phrase is, where the sentence sort of pauses or ends. And so that's in there. But whatever happens in between is just, like you say, it just follows, you just sing it how it comes out. Yeah. And so then the funny thing kind of that we saw was this big D at the beginning of the thing. That's kind of where a treble clef would be, or a bass clef, you know, showing right hand, left hand. Well, we were thinking, what is that D? You know, what kind of clef would be a D clef? You know, and so Barbara finally said, you know, what about Dorian? Maybe it's Dorian showing, because I was already thinking it's showing us where the note D is. If you see the middle of the the letter is written real big. If you go to the middle, it's like right where the bottom line of the staff is.
But see,
And
they would
normally that with clefs, that tells you that letter name is D, but then it's D Dorian.
They would know what
right.
a Dorian mode was.
Right.
I mean, I just
Right.
sing everything in modes. So.
Yeah, and so just real quick, what we're talking about, we always associate. If you take an ancient music history class, they're always talking about the modes.
Yeah,
and I used to wonder, like, why do we have to learn all these mode things, because we don't really use them that much now. You use them in jazz music. There's some application in jazz, but a lot of it is really kind of unique to the plain chant era.
Yeah, but you know what? They are they're everywhere if you look.
Well, they are. There's yeah. So what modes are is scales. And so we know a major scale, our do re mi scale, that from Julienne Roots of the Sound of Music. So we can call that a major scale, but before it was a major scale, it was called the Ionian mode.
That's right.
And it's an 8-note, progression up the white keys of the piano. Well, if you move over to the next note, D, and you do the same thing, you stay on the white keys. Well, it doesn't sound like the Ionian scale anymore. Now it's the Dorian mode. And so what we think this manuscript is that we're looking at, we think it starts and stays. It starts on the note D and it stays in D Dorian. It starts on the D Dorian note and it moves along, and then right in the middle of man is what is a B flat in this key, and it's consistent. It's a 4-line staff. It works for just like a 5-line staff does.
Pretty fun.
Yeah, so there's things there. You can see the evolution, what became a bar line, what became our clefs that we know today. And, so it's just an interesting thing to see that from the 15th century, how music had advanced to that point. Love it. So,
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too, absolutely.
And holding it makes us, it's a connection to the past. We're talking about how when we sing this, what a
great thing Mary did.
She did.
To give us that, the origin of that melody, because, and it's still anonymous. I mean, we're not saying that it's attributed to one person.
No, we don't know. The chant still does not have an author that's known.
But you can figure that they were carrying around this book with all their chants, and this is the one that was finally notated because it was probably the one that was sung the most often, and it's very easy to put to a melody because of its metrical form. So,
it's a wonderful merging. I guess we have those two Englishmen to thank for the merging of it, because it is a good marriage.
It is a very good marriage,
and text and melody.
And the verse is in feels like a more minor mode, and then the refrain is actually in harmony, usually sung with harmony, and it's much more joyful and has a major feel. So
absolutely.
It's what makes you feel so good.
Yeah, and I was telling you earlier that whenever this comes up in the church year, when it's used at Advent, it just it takes me to a place where I feel like I'm in that time period. Yeah. It's so gratifying, and so it's hard to explain almost what it makes you feel like as a singer too. It feels old, and it makes you connected to Christians from the past. It is
and
very sacred. I think it's very special, very sacred. I think that's what I'm trying to do. It seems like such a holy
sacred
prayer, to come back to and connect the past and how there was that longing for the coming, and yet we still wait for the second coming too. We always look forward to recognizing Christmas as the first coming, and we still wait.
We do, and our trials and tribulations are different, but they're still there, and they have always been there. So people have always found ways to pray, and I believe that chant is one of the most sacred ways of singing a prayer. And
Yeah.
it's dear to my heart because it is just such pure vocal music.
And so the purest recording we enjoy and love was Robert Shaw did record this on many occasions and sang it on many occasions with his choirs. And you know, did you ever sing it with him? Because you met Shaw a time or two.
I had the good fortune of singing with Shaw in either at Florida State and also with the Master Chorale of Tampa Bay, of course, with Bob Summer.
But not this.
We did not sing this, but boy, if you want to find a good recording, he's the first guy to go to.
So we're going to put that link on for you to enjoy, along with another choir that's very good as well. And they're the real deal. They've kept a lot of the integrity of how we feel like you would normally think of it. You know, lots of people have arranged it and done great modern things to it that are enjoyable, but we put the ones on there that will be more honorable to the 15th century,
and that's part of its appeal.
Yeah.
So it's good.
So anyway, Happy New Year, Happy Advent to you, and we will see you next time on the Music Chat.
Bye.